and we'll see how that goes.
Why are there 2 meetings going
on? That's interesting. What I experienced, if somebody goes in before you and I come in, it sort of kicks off the meeting, and maybe there are a couple people over there. I don't know how to fix that in short order. All right, well, we're up to 39. That's a fair amount.
Yep.
All right. It is officially 6 o'clock. I am officially going to get started. So welcome everybody to Philly.net. We're back. We do apologize for sort of being offline a couple months. It's partly the pandemic, partly I had a wedding. My son got married, and we also we had trouble finding enough speakers. And that's why we ended up having to cancel 2 months in a row. So we are going to work hard to get all of that back on track. So what I need to do is share my desktop. And folks should be able to see my desktop. And I have no idea. Oh, somebody, Rob, do you see these messages in the upper right-hand corner?
Yep.
Okay.
That's why I said there's 2 meetings. I sent a message to one of the guys in that meeting to say, hey, you're in the wrong one. And Chris also did the same thing.
That's very odd. I don't know why there's 2 of them with different names, but who knows? We'll learn someday.
All right, it's gone. There you go.
Excellent. Okay. So anyways, we're in the meeting, and I think I should be able to switch and show you the meeting, which is weird because I'm showing you the meeting that we're recording the meeting in. So we are up to 51 live right now. I'm Bill Wolf, and I'm the head of Philly.net, have been for, God, I can't remember, 19 years now. And also with me is Rob. I'll let you tell, or he can tell you about himself.
I've been helping out. Oh, now I got echo because you got the thing. I've been helping out Bill for most of the time.
There we go. We'll stop the echo stuff. Okay, fine. All right. So this is your meeting interface here. You can turn on and off the participants. You don't really need to see those. On the bottom, you can sort of hover over and see who the different people are, which is sort of interesting. There are people that are jumping into the lobby. Rob and I keep clicking and allowing them in. Whether you put your camera on is completely up to you. Most of the time tonight, we're going to be showing you screencast, so there's no value in you actually running the camera. If you want to speak up and ask a question, just unmute yourself. That's in the upper right-hand corner. You can also do Control-Shift-M. The meeting is being recorded. That's the little thing up in the upper left-hand corner. It reminds you that this is being recorded. I am going to show you a little bit about the Teams interface and basically Microsoft allowed us to get into a pilot program where we can run our user group using their fancy Teams software. They gave us license to do that. And technically, if you go in here and you go and manage the team, right now there are 1,106 members and guests, but technically they didn't all sign up. So what I mean by sign up is they didn't confirm their terms of service. So far we've had about 300 people actually confirm. And if once you confirm and you get on this list, then anytime I make a new meeting, you will get an email notification. Technically, you can message each other in here. You can have all sorts of fun doing collaborative stuff. Now, a lot of the stuff up here you will not see because those are only for the administrators, but you might see a couple meetings like say hello, and you might see a couple things like labs, meetings, and eventually you'll see camps. So what we're going to do is show you what a lab looks like. So this is a lab, and in a lab, there is a set of posts here. So when the meeting starts, there's actually a post that tells you it's happening. Also in here, if you click on and go to the meeting details, that's where you join the meeting, or you can just use the big join button. Each of the channels is a place to organize or store information that belongs together. So for me, a hands-on lab or a monthly meeting is a channel. This channel is going to stay here for at least a year or two. So all the information we captured today, including the recording, will be available here for you to review if you miss or if you want to come back and look at something. Up at the top, there are some tabs. There's a post, there is a files, yes?
I think somebody took over control.
Well, that was just awful that they did that from me. And I will take over control again. We have to play fair here. Please let us present, at least for the time being. Eventually, we'll give lots of others chances to present. I don't know. There's probably a way for us to turn that off, but I don't remember how to do that. Okay, so up at the top here, there are posts I was just explaining and showing you how you work with that. And then there are files, if we wanted to upload any files for you to look at for this particular channel, we would. Don't have any right now. And then there's a wiki. In the wiki, what I do is I copy the information from the meetup registration. And this tells you what's going on. Rob put a message here saying this is the software we're going to use today. So a lot of useful information here. And as I said, this all stays here for quite a period of time. Our goal tonight is to show you some stuff that has to do with .NET 5 and C# 9 that were just released a couple weeks ago. I think it was 3 weeks ago when they had the .NET conference. To do that, you want to have Visual Studio 2019, the latest version installed. When you install that, that will update your version of .NET. And I am going to just show you Visual Studio. Rob, are you going to do any command line stuff tonight?
Yes, actually.
Okay, when you do that, you might want to remind them how to look at their .NET versions that are installed at that time. So let me go back and look at the meeting and see how we're doing with the participants. We're up to 65. That's a reasonable number. What I'm going to do is I am going to start a new instance of Visual Studio 2019. You can do the same. And to do our first lesson here, I'm going to do a lesson on something called top-level programs. So what I want you to do is start Visual Studio 2019. And the goal tonight is for you to follow along on your own machine. Hopefully some of you can do that, or you're just welcome to watch us. I'm going to create a new project. When I go to create a new project, it shows you a bunch of templates that you've recently used, or you can pick from the master list here. I want to make a console app. So we're going to make a very simple console app. And I'm going to click next. it's going to say, where do you want to put that? And let's say I'm doing this for the lab. So I'm doing console app lab 1. It defaults to this folder that is created when you install Visual Studio. I really don't care where you store it tonight. Just pick one and say create. So it reads the template definition and it creates a bunch of files for you to work on. Console apps are not very challenging, not very complicated. And there you have a console app. Okay, now hopefully the font is big enough here, but does anybody remember quickly how to do font size?
Yes, at the very bottom left, you see 100%. You can change that value.
Ah, that'll work. Hold on. I just told it to do something. I'm not sure why it's being so slow here.
Control mouse wheel.
There you go. Okay, so I'll just leave it like that. So this way you can really see the code and have a good time with it. All right, so we've been making these things like ever since we were children, console apps. So it has a using system. The namespace is the same as the name of the solution or the project. We create a program, a main. The main is past the args, and then you do something inside. So just to prove that this works, do a run, and when you run, you're either going to do an F5 if you're into debugging, or a Control F5. So I'm going to do a Control F5 just to see how it works. And what this should do is bring up a debug console. And I don't know when they added this change, but basically when I run this, it actually comes up and tells me that it ran successfully. It exited with a code of 0, and I can press any key to close the window. I remember back in the day when you used to run console apps and it would just like show the screen and then it would disappear right away, and you'd have to put in a read key or a read key to stop it. But now it seems to want to do this, which is very nice. So now we know how to do this. Okay. Here's the new thing you're going to learn that they've just added. Take this stuff here, comment it out. Take this stuff here, comment it out. So now all we have is a console write line. Do you think this is going to work?
Only if you change to .NET 5.
Oh, shut up. You're not supposed to give away the clues. Okay. So right now it's not working. And if I try and run this, I'm going to get a nasty message saying, you know, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. This will never work. Okay. So as Rob tried to give away the secret, if you go up to the name of your project, right click and go properties or Alt Enter, you will find that by default, it makes a console app using an older .NET Core. I'm sure there's a way to change it so it uses the latest version. But right now it starts at .NET 3.1. So we switch it to .NET 5. As soon as we do that, the squiggles go away. Aha, that's useful. So now all I have is a using system and a console write line. If I try and run this with a Control F5, lo and behold, that's a seasonal phrase there. Lo and behold, it works. We have hello world and the world is wonderful. So that means that now in .NET 5, we don't need to have all this nonsense to have a simple test program. So I'm going to get rid of it. You can do the same. If I do a Control F, it even brings the console write line all the way over to the left side. Okay, now, next step. Do you really need to say console.writeLine? How many times have you done that in your programming life? I'm going to get rid of console. And then I'm going to say, uh-oh, I got squiggles. Now, if you get a squiggly message, that means this isn't going to compile. So probably what I wanted to do is this. Aha. It says, it's not very smart here. Show potentials. It wants me to add using suppress. And I have no idea what an IDE 00005 severity is. This is silly. Here's the secret. Make this a static. Okay, so if you want to use something that you're going to use a lot, a class like console, you can make it a static, and then all the methods from that are available at the top level. Might be sort of silly to do this, but it makes a very nice and neat and tidy little test harness here to test things. So all I have to do is say write line. If I do a Control F5, it works. Okay, now, next thing. When I run this, I get a return value. Did you know you could make any return value you want? And I want somebody other than Rob to answer this question. What is the, I forget if it's the secret or the answer to the universe?
42.
42.
Okay, so if I return 42 and do a Control F5, you're all welcome to do this. Yeah, you can run a program and return a 42, and that could mean that you succeeded. You can make the return values mean anything you want. All right, so even though we have this top level program, we can obviously do return values. All right, next step. Hopefully you know how to do this. You go over to your project on the Solution Explorer and go to Properties again. Then you go down to Debug. And you say, I want my name to be an argument that's going to be passed to the console program. Okay. Now, as soon as you do that and you do Control F5, absolutely nothing useful happens. Okay, but if we do this, everybody know what a $sign does for a string?
String interpolation.
Excellent. So in string interpolation, I can use curly braces and I can ask for variables. And I might as well leave in the exclamation point. Okay, so let's try and run that. And the purpose of this, oh boy, that was supposed to work. Why didn't that work? Hold on. Oh, can anyone see on my screen why this didn't work? Other than Rob.
You didn't save it yet.
Yeah, so I went into the console properties, I went into the project properties, but I forgot to save it. See the little asterisks? So it never passed the argument. So I'm going to save this, and then when I run it, it'll pick up my name. All right, muffled applause. That's enough. Okay. All right, so at least we got that part working. Now, last thing I want to show you, can I do async tasks in here? Absolutely. So to do that, I'm going to add a new line. And if you're not sure how to do that, you do a \n. You can put that anywhere in your string. So all that's going to do is put an empty line. If you're in old school, you would write the term write line with an empty parens. But that's just like so much extra typing. Why would you ever do that? Okay. So to do a, and I may have to go back, and I forgot exactly how to do this. So I may have to cheat. Give me a second here.
Bill, if I may,
Yes, sir.
you may care to do just what you said, the extra write line. If you're working between MS-DOS and Unix, in MS-DOS, you have carriage return line feed, while in Unix you only have line feed.
Oh, okay. I don't do any coding in Unix. That's a good that's a good tip. So you might have to. There might be a reason to put the right line there, and it'll handle it for you. All right. So what I'm going to do here is just to do something fun. I'm going to do an await. That's a background task. And when I do a task delay, I get squiggles because I need to do a using statement. So drop down from your light bulb and say, do the using statement so that we have the system threading tasks up there. And basically what I want to do is add another write line, which should work because I have the static system console. And this one is just a string. So let's say ready to learn. And of course we need our closing semicolon. Okay, so basically now what we're doing is we're using write line at the top level of a program. We're passing arguments, we're using async tasks, and then we're doing some nice formatting here. And if I test this, it waits 3 seconds, then it says I'm ready to learn, and away it goes. So that's sort of a fun thing to do. Now, since we're going to be doing some other activities from the console app, I'm going to ask you to keep this handy. Rob's going to do the next session, but before it's over, I want to make a copy of this, and I want everybody to do this because it'll teach you a lesson. So we're going to make a copy of program by doing a right-click, copy, and then right-click, paste. You have to be on the project name to do the paste, and then we're going to rename this something useful like top level. So then you have a record of what we did. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I now want you to try and run the program.
Hey, you know, Bill, I installed the .NET 5 framework, but it doesn't show up in the target frameworks. Any advice?
Did you install the upgrade to Visual Studio 2019?
That might be the problem.
I believe that is required for you to be able to do all the things that I'm demonstrating.
Yeah, I think you have to download new Visual Studio, I think.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so now the reason this doesn't work, see the message on the bottom? It says only one compilation unit can have top level statements. So even though you find this top level thing sort of convenient to do testing, technically we can't have two C# programs that both have top level statements. So my suggestion to you is to comment out the ones in top level. Then you have a record of what we did in this exercise. And then only one of the programs is going to be top level. And essentially what's happening is the compiler is looking for some C# program at the root of the project that either has a program main or top level statements, one or the other. And just to prove this works, now it works fine and my timer still works and everything's happy. So. All right, so that's my first of 5 demos. I'm going to let Rob take over the screen.
Alrighty. I'm getting there.
For those of you in the studio audiences, we're up to 83 people live. Oh,
And-
waiting in the
and
line. 84.
All right. So before I run any of this stuff, for those of you who were wondering what version, you can just start up the Visual Studio installer. That's one easy way to do it, that's how Visual Studio gets installed. And if you do that, this is on a pretty clean machine. I just built it just for tonight. You can see that this is the current version. If there were updates, it would say that you could update it right here. So if you bring up Visual Studio Installer, check to see if there's any updates for you to get, you can do that. This is the non-preview version. So 16.8.2 is the latest version available. If you want to see what you've got installed, since Bill was bringing that up, let's see. If you do .NET, I think it's list, what is it, runtimes? That will show you the runtimes that are available on your machine. So that's one way to do it.
Yeah, the guy that asked, if he did this, he would see whether he had .NET 5 installed.
Right.
But if he doesn't have support of Visual Studio, we might not be able to work with it.
Correct. So that's that. So why don't we, I need you to start a project. So either start another version of Visual Studio, which is fine, you can do that, or you can close the current one you've got and bring up a new one. And what you want to do is get to this start page here, and we're going to create a new project from here. So I'll give everybody a minute just to get situated there. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a web API project. So when you click on create new project, I want an ASP.NET Core web application. I know when I said web API, that's part of this, is the web API is in here. And you can see in here it says Core Web Apps and Web APIs for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. So this is the one you want, ASP.NET Core Web Application. So you can click on that and make sure it's selected and then go on to next. Now, because this does have a few things that we're going to have to answer a few questions for, just keep going through this and we'll get to them. So web application 1, it's fine. We can make it web application 1. And if we say create, now we have to answer more questions. So this is where we get to decide what kind of application we want to have. And you can see, you can create just an empty one, a web API, a web app, a model view controller, remember those? an Angular app, or a React app. So you have lots of choices here. We want the ASP.NET Core Web API. We also want to make sure this says ASP.NET Core 5 up here. So make sure you select it from the dropdown. And this should be .NET Core. Now you can see on the right here, there's a few things that are old and some things that are new. So the authentication stuff, they added that a couple versions ago. You can configure for HTTPS. I'm just gonna leave mine that way. You can turn it off if you don't want to have it that way. It's not gonna hurt.
Quick question.
Yes.
So you created web application model view controller or API?
API.
API?
Yes.
Selected API?
Yep. Core Web API.
Thank you.
Okay. You can turn on HTTPS. You can enable Docker support so that it can build right inside of a Docker container. I'm not going to do that right now. And then there's this new one down here, enable Open API support. So that you do want to have checked, because that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. Does anybody know what Open API is?
No.
You go ahead.
Swagger.
Yes, Swagger. But Open API is the generic name. It is Swagger. All right. So let's create this little web API, and it's a nice little thing. It gives you a little weather API app that runs. And if we look here, we've got our typical, project here. We've got a startup. We've got a weather forecast CS file, which is just a class. We've got the startup and we've got the program, both of which are not too important or not too nice to look here in the required. And then the controller with the weather forecast controllers in it. So this is just a web API application. And you can see it's got some decoration on here. You got the API controller. You've got a route set up in here. And this particular one has one get method right here. Now, normally, or in the past, before we started playing with Swagger or with other utilities, this started to become very difficult to test because you have to either spin something up or you'd have to use some other utility. A lot of people like to use Postman for this kind of stuff, and that works great, still does. But this lets you do things a little bit quicker just for testing things out. So let's run this application, and you can either run it as IIS Express or you can run it as Web Application 1 or whatever you called your application. Either one, it'll work the same way, both ways. So I'm just going to select Web Application 1 and click on the run. And it should run. And there it goes. So this is obviously not a web page that you would give out to anybody unless you want to give them the access to be able to see what pieces of your API they can use. You can do a lot of configuration in here. We're not going to go into that stuff. That's part of a Swagger talk. Maybe we should give it some later time. But you can see there is one get method in there, and there it is right there. And if you click on it, you can find out if it needs any parameters, what the responses are, what the codes are, when it's successful. And here's an example of what's going to come out. So you can see it's going to be an array of this JSON object that's got a date, a temperature, and a summary in it. Okay. You also have the schemas down here. So we didn't have to do any of this stuff. What it's doing is it's going in, looking at the code, figuring all this stuff out, and building up this file, and then presenting you this data. And we can, of course, try it out. Since this doesn't take anything, it's a real simple, just you click on the try it out button, and then it gives you this big execute button that you can't miss. And you click on that, and it actually executes it, and this is the result. So here's the curl. So if you want to use something that does use curl, you can just copy it. There's a little copy command over here on the right-hand side. Copy it, use this, and it'll still work. And then this is the response body, and you can download it. You can copy it to the clipboard. All that stuff's available. You've got response headers that are showing up here, right? So this all helps you trying to figure out what's going on when you're doing this stuff. Now, all this stuff is fine, and it's like, okay, well, fine, I can do all this stuff with something else, with the REST client in Visual Studio, with Postman or anything else. The real key here, the real reason why we need this kind of thing is so that we can give it out to other people. And the way that happens is with this link over here, the swagger.json file. And if you click on that, it shows you the definition of your web API. And this you can just give out to people if you wanted to, or that you can just point them to the Swagger page, they can go and get it themselves. And it has all the things that somebody might need in order to access your web API. So there you go. So that.
Hey, Rob.
Yes.
We do a lot of development with Salesforce as well. And one of the benefits of this is that on the Salesforce side, you can actually take this file and feed it to Salesforce, or Salesforce admin can feed it into their system, and they actually will black box build all of the code to talk to your APIs. So then, their click and point tools that administrators have and stuff can work with your API and do things without having to code for it, which is pretty cool. And I read somewhere that Microsoft is also motivated by stuff like that with their Power Apps and things, so that as developers we can build APIs and then give this stuff out and have some of these low code solutions work with this stuff.
Yep, and that's what did we used to have to do with the old stuff we had? Bill, you remember what we used to do with that stuff? The XML files we had to give out.
Yeah, a WASM file. No.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, or whatever it is.
Yep. Yeah.
WSDL file.
WSDL. WSDL.
WSDL. That's it.
Yeah.
Web Service Discovery Language.
Yes. So basically, that's what this is. But this is, with JSON, and it's newer and it's better. So there you go.
Yeah. So whoever mentioned that, the Salesforce thing is an interesting connection.
Yes.
I still don't understand why they spent so much money to buy Slack, but that's a whole other discussion.
Only $27.7 billion. I mean,
billion.
Yes.
Why?
We got to pay Metallica.
Spend. But yes. So what Rob is showing you here, the other thing that has happened is there's a lot of new integration in Visual Studio for Azure API management, and there are ways to put APIs in Azure, secure them using Azure Active Directory, and that interacts with what you're doing here. So the Swagger automatically ties into that, and you can test your cloud-based APIs this way as well.
Yes. So this is great, and it's wonderful. But how do I have to do anything to maintain this or anything? So let's come back to our application. Just shut down the web browser there, and let's add some code here. And what I'm going to do, if this works, let's see. Yes. Okay. So I pasted some code into the chat. So if you're following along, you can copy this and put it right after this HTTP GET call right here. And I think it's correct. And this is just a stupid little post command.
By the way, chat is only available to team members.
You can't see the chat?
No. That's the message I get. Chat in channel meeting is only available to team members.
How dare they? All right. Well, for those who can see it, you can try it out. And I have it here up on the screen. If I'll just leave it here for a couple minutes and go over what it's doing. It's basically a copy of the GET call with some minor changes to it. So if you just copy the GET call and then make some changes to the signature and some other, like add a couple lines here, it's really pretty straightforward. Assuming I do it right. So I'll just leave that there for the time being.
Rob, I'm looking in the meeting chat. I don't see the code that you're talking about.
You don't see it?
I do not.
I will do it one more time. Just to
Maybe you pasted it in a private chat, Rob.
I put it in meeting chat, but I'll put it over here in the other chat. Can you
Well,
see it now?
I don't know.
Last message was from Chris at 6:28.
No,
No, that is the channel chat. That's different from the meeting chat.
How about now?
It says, now I can see it.
Oh,
All right,
Alright.
see it.
yeah, you had put it into the channel chat. Silly boy.
I put it in both places, but okay.
Now
And
you
that's
put it
why
in
it's
both. Very
that's why
good.
it's in there twice. But all right. There it is. Can you all see it now? Those who have access to that.
All right.
no.
Uh,
We can, yes. Yeah.
all right. I'll wait. What it was is I didn't hit the enter key. That's why it was my fault.
Well, that happens.
Yes. So what this is doing is it's just doing a post command. We're going to send in a weather forecast, which is what that one schema was at the bottom. And we're still going to run through and create this generic or this randomized forecast. But at the very end, we're going to add one that we put in. That's what this one down here at the bottom does. And then we're just going to return it. Pretty simple. So once you get this code in your project, if you run this, what you'll see is, lo and behold, I'll use Bill's phrases there. Now we have a get and a post. So you can see it's doing, it's evaluating the code on the fly and coming up with this this Swagger page. And if we look at the post, it looks very similar to the get, except in this case, it gives us an example schema of what it's expecting. It also gives us the same, success stuff at the bottom. And if we try this one out, what we have to do is we will have to actually create a request body. So it already helps us out by filling in the date. And it says, let's give us a temperature. So put in some sort of temperature here. I'm going to make it 100 degrees Celsius. And I'm going to say it's boiling. Just, because. And then once you do that, you click on the execute button down here at the bottom. And you get the response, which is the response body down here. And you can see that the last response is the one I typed in. So there you go. Okay. So hopefully we're all able to do this. And again, you can look at the JSON that gets generated. It now has both the get and the post. There's the post with all the information about that's needed for that. The response codes, all that stuff is all in there. So there you go.
So this only provides JSON file, right? Not YAML file, right? Just the JSON.
Just the JSON file. Yep. Because that's what's the Open API sort of expects that kind of thing.
You could take that to that Swagger site. There's like a Swagger IO and put the JSON in, and it has a spool, and it'll give you the YAML.
Yeah, you can
Convert to YAML. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did we enable that? I missed that part. How did you enable this Swagger thing?
In the very beginning, when we created our application, I will go through it real quick just so you see where it was. So I'm going to start up another one here, another Visual Studio, because you're not doing real development work unless you have at least 3 Visual Studios running at once. So when we created the project, I created an ASP.NET Core web application project. I'm just going to leave it alone, go to the next page, and this page here tells us we're going to do a web API, and this is where you specify
Open API. Okay.
enable Open API support.
Okay. For some reason, I was not able to see that.
Well, you sort of have to click on this guy first before
ASP.NET.
that shows up. So if I'm on this one, for example, it's not there.
Okay.
Right, there it is. If I'm on something else, it's not there. It's only there for the web API because that's what it's for.
Okay, okay. I selected 3 point something. So the moment I select core 5,
Ah, yes, you do have to
then I
have
get
5.
then I get that option.
Yes.
A valuable lesson has been learned.
Yes, it has.
Yes.
Okay, notice that the Open API support is the default now. It is possible, even using the command line, if you build the project, to remove that if there's a reason you don't want Swagger.
Right. We'll cancel this out. And basically, it sticks it in the startup. Is that where it goes? Yep. So you got all the Swagger stuff just gets put in here. This is what we had to do by hand before. We had to stick all the stuff in.
Right.
We had
So
to
instead of doing by hand, like just enabling that checkbox does that now. Okay, that's
Yeah.
And it puts in the correct parameters, because I've
Yeah.
got those parameters wrong more than once.
Yes. So
Is
there
it
we go.
Flash Swagger, is it V1? Is it V2? Is it? What a mess.
Yes. So that's all for this one. Bill, back to you.
And now for something completely different. So, we were working on our lab app. If you can switch back to that, that would be splendid. If you came in later on, create a new console app. Make sure you're using .NET 5 framework. And this is the code that we ran about 15 or 20 minutes ago. So just a reminder, we're using what are called top level commands. So we got rid of the namespace, we got rid of the program, we got rid of the main call with the args, and we're just starting right from the left-hand margin there. And when we run this, it runs just fine. So now we're going to talk about something called KnitOnly Properties. And this has to do with using classes. So I'll give you a few moments to write this in, but basically I want you to make a class called a player. And it's going to have a position and a last name. And this is pretty straightforward. Now, what we're going to do here, by default, I'll fix this up. By default, a class typically would have a getter and a setter. If you're not familiar with the question mark, that means we're making a nullable string. That's a whole other discussion, but you just leave it there for now. It won't hurt anything.
Bill, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you allowed to put that class at the top like that?
Rob, will you let me do the presentation, please?
Oh, sorry. Just a question.
That is where I'm going with this.
Ah.
Yes, you have astutely noticed that when you put the class at the top, which is the kind of thing that sometimes you do when you have a namespace and you have a class called program and a method called main. Well, the problem is if you put the class at the top, then you get the squiggles, which is bad. And it tells you, and this is very easy to understand, it says top level statements must always precede namespace and type declarations. Well, technically, I don't have a namespace. What are they talking about? Well, it's this simple. When you put it up at the top, it doesn't work. You have to put this at the bottom. And once you do that, then having a class called player is perfectly valid. And if I go to run it, of course it runs. Even though I'm not using the class player, it's going to run and work as it did before. Okay, So, in the essence of time, I'm going to change my delay to 1,000. So that's technically 1 second. And somewhere in here, I want to init a player. So what I normally would do here is I would make either a var or a player. And we'll call this player. And the way classes work, we make a new player. And then we have to set some stuff up here. So we'd have to say position equals, and we're going to make a quarterback. And you can guess where I'm going with this. Last name equals.
Is that a true statement?
Whatever. Yeah, we're going to have some fun with this. Okay, now, ready to learn doesn't mean anything to me anymore. So let's do this. Let's get rid of ready to learn and just put in player. And I'll explain why in a few minutes. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to right line the player. Everything seems fine. Go ahead and run this.
Yep.
You get a 1 second delay and you get the word player in uppercase. What is player in uppercase?
Name of the class?
Correct.
Last name?
So, and I want you to remember this about a half an hour from now. Everybody going to remember it? Okay. So we're just going to right line player, and that's completely useless to us.
It took I easily, I can't even tell you how many I did. There were hundreds, man. Well, lots. Yeah.
All right. So let's put player dot last name. And of course, IntelliSense works because once I use the string interpolation and I put the name of a object in here, then I can access its fields and things like that. So this time I can actually go and get the player's last name, and that's useful. So I'm going to run that just to see if that works. And yes, Wentz is our starting quarterback.
For now.
One question, Bob. What line of code the compiler understands that you have a static method and then it compiles? Because you move that public class player to the bottom, right?
Yeah, but it doesn't. The compiler doesn't necessarily read this from top to bottom. Technically, the compiler will find all of the classes and it'll create a.
My question is like, if you comment all the lines above player, right? It would compile, right? If you it'll give you the error. Is that correct? If you remove all these right line, await, player, right line, return, all these 5 lines, if you comment, it's going to give you the error saying that the static method, there is no entry point, right?
Oh, so you're saying
comment everything and then compile it
and run it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but
So no, I don't want to do that, but I'm asking like what line of code making compiler to think that you have entry point for the static method.
I think the answer to that is you need one top level statement.
Any one top level statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the answer to the universe could be 42.
So if I write right line or return anything, okay.
Yep.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, but bring it. That's a good point. So anyway, what about these init-only things? What is he talking about? Can we change our starter, a guy named Jalen Hurts? That seems perfectly reasonable. And even though we defined it and initialized it, and the constructor took the last name and put it into, that field, then we can change it later. And now our starter is Hertz. Seems okay. Well, what the clever people on the .NET team did is they said, well, sometimes you want to have a class where you can set the fields when you create the class in the constructor, but after that, you want them to be read-only, so that something like changing a player's name would be a mistake. And they added a new keyword for that. And what happens here, I want you to go down into the class where it says set, double click that and type the letter I. And what you're going to see is there now is an init keyword. And when you use init instead of set, it means that you are making essentially, you're making an object that only can be set when you construct it, and you can't change it after that. It's immutable. And this red squiggle automatically knows it says you're using an init-only property. And you can only assign that when you initialize. Now, they give you more verbiage here probably than you need, but I sort of understand that. So the only way we could fix this is to comment out this line. And then we're stuck with whence. And I truly believe this is what happened to the Eagles. They're not allowed to put Hertz in there because you had to with that joke, are you? All right. Hopefully you had a little fun with this one. Went still our starter. And there you have it. So what I'm going to do, just like I did last time, I'm going to make a copy of this. Because, you may want to go back and look at this someday, sometime in your life. So really simple. I'm just going to copy this, paste it. And let's rename this. And we'll call this init only. And then we're going to have all these error messages. And that's because init only has to be commented out so that we don't have more than one C# program with top level statements. So that's init only properties. Rob, what else do you have to show them?
All right. Well,
Rob, before we jump to that, I can't keep ignoring that string nullable thing. Why do we need that?
We don't. It was just in the example. Here, I'll prove it to you. I'll delete it, and the exact same thing happens. It's just a new feature that you can have. You can have nullable strings, and it means something in certain types of coding situations, but we're not presenting that today.
Yep.
So I'm misleading you by showing you new features and not explaining why they're there.
I have another question.
Yep.
So if you remove the init there, right? So if you have just without init, right? It's going to do the same thing, right? If you uncomment that player Hertz. So basically it's without set.
No. Nope. If they don't have a setter,
so,
if you don't have a setter, you
cannot even initialize. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Makes sense. That is the difference. Okay.
That is the difference. All right. I rest my case, Mr. Kaiser.
all right. So if you want to go back to the other project, just so we keep things separate here so we don't get too confusing. And I'll wait. So everybody knows that Microsoft now owns GitHub, right? And they've been starting to slowly get that integrated into Visual Studio. So what we're going to do right now is just go over some of the Git stuff in 2 weeks. Is that right, Bill?
Correct.
In 2 weeks, Chris Gomez is going to go into detail on this stuff. We're just going to show you that it's there and that it's available. And you can play with it if you want to. So if you're going to follow along with this and do all the stuff, you will have to have a GitHub account for this right now. You can get one set up. It's free, it's easy, and it doesn't hurt at all, as Bill likes to say. So one of the things you'll notice up here in the top, if you can see that, is a new Git menu item. What you also notice is down here, there is a Git Changes tab on my screen. Now, what's not here is the Teams stuff. Now, part of that is because I'm running, I think Community doesn't have Teams in it, but this is allows you to have the Git stuff turned on in this. Also, I think it was the last version of Visual Studio, last major version that they allowed you to install Git right when you installed Visual Studio. I did not install Git on this machine. I just installed Visual Studio. I get all the pieces that I need. I don't have to install anything else if I don't want to. So let's take a look up here at this Git menu item. So I can do a clone, and I can create a Git repository, and I can look at local repositories and their settings. So in the settings, if we look in there, you'll see I already have set up my username, my email address, all the stuff I need because I have actually created a repository from this machine before. If you haven't done that yet, these things will be blank, and we'll get them filled in semi-automatically in a minute. But you can see all the different settings you can put right inside here. It's part of the source control, and it's the Git repository, Git global settings, and there's the Git repository settings right here as well that you can look at if you want to. I have no active Git repository yet. I haven't created one yet. So even though I put it in that sources repos, because that's what everybody likes to have it in there, it's not a Git repository yet. I can create one fairly easily by just coming up here to the top at the Git and saying create Git repository. And then it's going to open up this screen here. Now, if it's the first time you've done this, the account will be blank and the owner will be blank. And you can fill them in. So if you click on this, you can go and add a GitHub account, which is probably what you see if you don't have anything in there. If you do this, or if you log in with the Git account, it'll take you to the GitHub login page, sort of login page. It's really a Visual Studio one. Lets you log in. It says, are you giving permissions to allow Visual Studio to be able to get access to this stuff? You say yes, and you can go on from there. So. So that's here. So if I say yes, I want to create this. I'm going to call this something stupid. So I'm going to call it Affiliate.net Hands-on Lab Git example. All right, just because I can. I also, I don't know, they started allowing private ones for, and maybe Chris knows more about this one than I do. So Chris, is private available for everybody, or do you have to have special accounts for that these days? Chris is not listening.
I think everyone can. It is available to everyone.
It's available for everyone. I thought they had changed that. I can never remember because I have an account that had it before. So you can make it private right from here, and this will initialize a Git repository. It will create and push my code up. So if I hit the create button, assuming everything works the way it's supposed to, and it looks like it did. I now have a little master down here at the bottom. And if I go into Get Changes, I can see that I have no changes. And if I go up here into the Get Menu item, I can see I now have Fetch, Pull, Push, those kind of things, all the things I might want to do with my repository. And if you do a quick check and open up GitHub, and log in, here's my, there it is. My repo got pushed up and into the master branch. By the way, they did allow you to make changes to that, so you don't have to call it master anymore. So just an aside. All right, so it's there. Great, wonderful. So let's come down to where the master, it says master down here. You can do it this way, and you can see you've got all the same menu items as you had up here in the Git, or most of the menu items that you would need up here. I like to do it down here at the bottom because other things are down here, and it's just where I've been used to doing it. I'm going to create a new branch, and I'm just going to call it branch 1. I'm going to base it off a master, and I'm going to check out my branch. So all this stuff is built right in. I did not have to install Git for this install to work. I just installed Visual Studio. And I'm going to say create. And you can see down here, I now have branch 1. And let's do something stupid. Let's change the summaries to something silly. I don't know if I spelled that right, but there you go. Cool as a cucumber. And I'm going to save this. And you can see now in my Git changes, I now have something to push to commit. And you can also see I can stash it if I want to. So if I don't want to, if I'm doing something else and I want to download a different version or something, I want to stash something, I can do it right here. All that stuff's available. I can even amend commits if I want to right there as well. And we're just going to put in here a silly change, and we're going to commit it. Now, notice I didn't have to stage it first. I know Chris probably cringed a little bit at that I didn't stage it first, but it was a simple change, so I'm not going to worry about it. It tells me I committed it. It was created locally, so it tells me all the information right here. And if we look down here at the bottom, I can see I've got one unpushed commit. So I can push it right from here, or I can push it from up here. These guys like to give you all sorts of options. So I'm just going to go up here to the right-hand side at the top and push that up. And it's telling me it's pushing it in the background, and it successfully pushed the branch. And I can create a request right from here as well. I'm not going to do that right now. But what I am going to do is do a quick check on manage branches. So if I'm coming here to manage branches, they added this nice little screen here, which it's certainly not as feature rich as some of the third-party utilities are out there, but this gets you by without too much difficulty. You've got your IDs over here, the branches. I've got the fact that I'm on branch 1. There's masters down there. So I have all the changes I've made. I can check to see what's up in the remote branches. So that's my origin branch 1. That's my origin master. So I can turn that on. And I can also see over here all the branches, whether they're remote or local. And I can check them out from here as well. So if I wanted to check this out, I could check it out by just double clicking here, and it should check out the master branch. And if it didn't do it, then I'm being silly, but it should have done it there. Who knows? I guess it's not going to do it. Well, I can do it down here. I can check out master just by clicking there. So now I got master checked out. I don't know why it doesn't work there. It worked there before. Oh well, doesn't matter. You can do it down here at the bottom right if you want to. So this also lists all the branches. And again, I can create a pull request right from here. So there you go. So that's the quick overview of the Git stuff that got added. Any questions? I've put them all to sleep. All right. Bill.
Say what?
You're up.
Yeah, let's do some more coding. Oh boy. Where were we? We were working on a console app. This is probably the most interesting part of C# 9, and it's called records. So we have our simple example here where we're creating a player, and it has two fields, position and last name. And you can still be working in the same instance that I had you set up earlier, as long as you're in the program CS. So what we're going to do is we're going to change a player into a record. Record is a new keyword. Now, visually, the first thing that happens is that the little references notifiers above each of the fields go away. However, apparently a player can do, or excuse me, a record can do a lot of things classes can do, because it can have public strings, it can have getters, it can have initters. In fact, no errors in this code at all. If we just run it, it works perfectly fine. So the first thing you wonder is, why would you have records? They seem to do the same thing as a class. Basically, records are going to be used for classes that assign a lot of immutable values, which is something we do a lot when we interact with if you're connecting to a database and you're bringing back the results of queries and you're just displaying them on the screen, not letting people edit stuff, then a record would be a reasonable thing to do. So far, a record doesn't save us anything because it's actually, I don't know, one more character to type. So it seems to be they're almost identical. But there's some things you can do. So for instance, we can create something called the backup. This has to do with the backup quarterback. Just bear with me a second. So what we're going to do here is rather than have this last name equals Hertz, let's make a backup. And we're going to take the player. And what's interesting here is that there's a new statement called with. Okay, so that's completely different from what we've seen before. So what we're essentially doing here is we're making a copy of this player, and it's going to be now the object called backup. And what we want to do is we want to keep the position at quarterback, but we want to change the last name. And again, this is the kind of thing we would often do when we're working with lots of data, and the data came from a database, and then we want to like change a value and use it for some short period of time. So the with keyword allows me to do that. Now, for me to actually display that, what I'd like to do is come down here, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to say backup dot last name, and I know that I want to skip a line to make it more readable. I'll throw that in there. That's certainly optional. So this time it should print the starter's last name and then skip a line and print the backup's last name. So I'm going to run that. And it works. So basically, this is something you can't do with classes, but you can do with records. Now, I know what you're thinking. What if I change this so that it just shows the player and the backup? Okay, I'll give you a second to type that in. And I asked you a half an hour ago to remember something. What do you think would happen when you right line player?
Player twice.
Okay, well,
Position.
guess what? Records don't do that. So I'm going to run this and show you what they do. Aha! So apparently the toString is essentially overloaded or overwritten or something, and it actually gets to a more useful display of information, and it shows you we have two different players. So it shows you the name of the rec or the type of record, and then it shows you the position and the last name. That's sort of useful if you're debugging. So that's a new trick that you can do with records. Okay, now. Next.
Now we don't have to convert it, right? So whether it's to array or to string, we don't have to do it. That's what you were saying.
Exactly. But again, that's
useful.
more...
Maybe if we are logging, we can log the whole thing now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So so that has some value. Now the next thing is, suppose we want to make a new class. So let's make a class called quarterback or QB. And what we're going to do with that class is we're going to inherit from player. And then let's add a public double, called rating. And if you're not a big NFL fan, quarterbacks have ratings. They're very important. Some of our quarterbacks have very low ratings. You're welcome to look them up. So we got a red squiggle. Not a good thing. Any idea why I have a red squiggle?
I think so both have different types, like one is class and one is record.
Well, exactly. That is the answer you get when you mouse over. Only records may inherit from records. Yeah, that makes sense. So even though they allow us to have this thing that sort of acts like a class, we have to be careful that we don't mix records and classes over and over. And again, records are sort of value oriented. They're not designed to have mutable properties and lots of, you can still have constructors, you can still have methods and stuff, but they're really designed to handle value data, sort of like a struct. If any of you ever use structs. So A record to me is like halfway between a struct and a class. Okay, so let's use our new QB, and we're going to make a new entry here. And we're going to call this an MVP. By the way, we don't have these on the Eagles. So how do I set this up? Well, as you imagine, I would have a position equals, and last name equals, and if any of you watch NFL football, this guy, like the other day, he threw for like 250 yards in the first quarter.
You mean Mahomes?
Mahomes, yeah, not Mahomes. Silly typing error. Okay, now he also gets a rating, and I happened, since I looked it up, his quarterback rating is that. And just for the record, Wentz's is about 72. Quite a difference. Okay, so now we've made a new record of type QB, and QB is inheriting from player. So it has position, last name from player, and rating from just QB. And of course, what we want to do here, oops, we want to take this and display the MVP. Make sense? And it works. And since a QB is a different type and it has an extra field, it displays those automatically for you. Very convenient. Okay, now, there's another thing you can do that makes this even less typing. So this little trick here saves typing. That's good. Now we're going to do something where we're going to make what's called a positional record. And a positional record will look like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out the original one. And I'm going to make a public record. But the difference is I'm going to have parentheses, not that. With you in a second here. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to say string position. And then I'm going to say string last name, and I'm going to close that with a paren. That's a very simple, compact syntax. Now, what this does behind the scenes is it assumes you want to make a get and a knit pair for each of these fields you're defining. Secondly, it automatically makes a constructor. The constructor takes care of letting you assign the values. That is why this player up here, well, I'm going to fix that in a moment, but that's why you're allowed to just assign things without actually putting the field names. You put them in their ordinal position. And then the last thing it does is it makes a deconstructor. I'll explain that in a moment. So what I'm going to do here is to make player work, I've got to change the syntax up here and it actually has to use the paren as well, but you do not put in the field names. So again, it's just economy of syntax. So that makes a player, and you can still assign the quarterback and the Wentz. You just sort of have to know when you make it, what order they come in. And if you look at your IntelliSense, you will see that it knows that it requires a string called position and a string called last name. So I'm good with that.
Hey, Bill, is that going to work for a class as well?
Nope.
All right.
You can only do positional on records. Now.
And default will be init, right? I mean, not it's always going to be get and init, right? For record.
You can override that if you want, but if you're going to override that, I would suggest maybe you should be using a class.
Right.
So.
Aren't records immutable?
Excuse me?
Aren't they immutable?
They are by default. You can override that. But in the instructions, they say, well, if you're going to do that, why you really think hard about why you're doing that.
Yeah, whole purpose of using record is like when you want to use, like if you want to make it immutable, right?
So.
Yes.
Correct. That's why that's one of the things. Now, you have to change this syntax so that it does this. Okay. However, if you're going to inherit from player, you also have to tell it that player has a position. I mean, I found this syntax a little awkward. Okay. And if you keep trying and get rid of the squiggly lines, you'll understand. But so what I'm doing here is I'm making a record in positional syntax, but I'm inheriting from player. And when I do that, I have to say the order in which things appear. So I know that players have a position and a last name. So I'm going to make my quarterback be positional with position, last name, and then I'll add the additional rating. And once I've gone through that, I now have both of these down to a single line definition. And if I go up above here, you say, well, I broke my quarterback assignment, but that's because when I'm using positional, I know I don't use the names, and I have to bracket with parens and not. Okay. And I lost my original line. I was going to make a copy of that, but that's not a big deal. So, so that is the like the least amount of typing if you want to be like really difficult and make it hard for your support programmers 3 years from now to understand what you did. This is the way to do it. And just to prove that, if I run this, it absolutely works exactly as it did before. But wait, there's more. I mentioned there's things called there's a thing called a deconstructor. Has anyone ever deconstructed?
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, sometimes you would do this on purpose, and I'll explain why. So suppose I make a P, an L, and an R. These are just, variables. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to assign MVP to this. And this is another dirty little trick that records can do. So a record by default knows that it has three things, and it knows that they are positional. So if you say, give me a var with three things, it knows what each of them is. And what we'll do is we'll put 4 write lines, and we'll write down the P, the L, and the R. And with very little trouble, I have now taken all of the fields out of MVP, made them into discrete variables, and then I can do with them as I please. And when I run that, you will see that it takes QB, Mahomes, and the rating and just froze them on the screen for you. Sort of a good trick. So, any questions on?
Yeah, I have one question. So, what will happen if you don't inherit a player? Because you already have, record player and quarterback. If you don't inherit, right, it shouldn't be working.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it doesn't make sense to inherit.
I agree with you. And but I was just going by the examples they showed me in the documentation. They said if you do want to inherit, that you have to like specify this. And
maybe
if
yeah.
you want to like, I guess if you want to be able to convert a player into a quarterback or something, I don't know exactly why. It's just the syntax that they
Yeah, what will happen if you remove position and last name from quarterback?
Not going to do that right now because we're
Yeah,
time.
I just tried that and it's nice. You can remove position from the QB initialization and then put a constant in for the player section of it because it's you know it's QB because of the
think if
the record type.
Work.
So if you do this, you mean get rid of these?
Well, I left last name, but I removed position. And then you can specify a constant on the right side of it.
All right. Well, these are all interesting things to try. I highly recommend you read about records and play with them. We need to move on to the next demonstration. Yeah, so that's sort of a cool thing to do. And I'm going to leave that as is and let Rob do his next segment.
Just by the way, I feel the reason you need to inherit is because otherwise you create two different types. I believe so. I'm not sure.
All right, well, let's get off of that. Go ahead, Rob.
All right, so now we're going to do some command line stuff. So everybody know what a REPL is? There's some stuff, there's some REPLs for C# built into Visual Studio where you can just type in some C# commands and they execute right away. Well, there is a little utility for an HTTP REPL so that you can enter in HTTP requests to your web API. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point of this? I've already got my Swagger page. And that's true. They work slightly differently and they could be used for different things. This is a little bit more command line oriented, plus it allows you to do some scripting. You can do something similar with REST in Visual Studio or with Postman, but hey, we're playing with this stuff. So what can I tell you? If you want to play along, you will need to install the HTTP REPL into your machine. So the command that's up there now, and can everybody see that? I'm getting nothing. So .NET tool install -G for global and the REPL in there. So what it's doing is going out to the NuGet repository and bringing this down. And if you run this, it will install it. Hopefully you can do that. I did have some problems on one of the machines I was playing with because of some restrictions, and I just had to do a few things to get around that. But otherwise, it worked the way it was supposed to. If I do this, I believe I've already got it installed, so who knows what will happen, but we'll just...
Since it is global, I can be on any path, right?
Yes. Yes. So you can see I try to do it. I already have it installed, so it's already there. So how's this work?
Rob, your screen share stopped.
My screen share stopped. Well, let's start it back up again. How's that? All right.
Better, thank you.
Good. So, how do you start it? Well, you just type in HTTP REPL. And it starts. and it gives you this very inscrutable command that says disconnected. So obviously it wants to have a web API sitting behind it so you can actually talk to it. So let's start up our web application again. So if you don't have that up and running, or if you don't have that available, go ahead and start it, go back into it, start it up, and just run it. Again, it doesn't matter if it's running through IIS or through Kestrel. You can just let it start up. Now, of course, right now, because I have it set up the way it does, it's going to open up my Swagger page. I'm going to get rid of that for the time being. I don't need it. All right. So where is my page? So it's listing on HTTP host 5000 or 5001 for HTTPS. So let's grab that and connect to that source. And whatever your number is, that's the one you should use. Now, when I do this, what it's going to do is it's going to go out and it's going to find the Swagger page. So in order for this to work, you have to have a swagger.json file sitting out there. That's how this thing works. It reads that file. So now you can see if you wanted to connect to somebody else's web page that has a Swagger on it, you could do that as well by connecting to that one as far away. So I'm now connected to the web API that I'm running. And what can I do now? Well, interestingly enough, I can do a directory of my endpoints. Look at that. And for the Unix people, ls works too. And is one less character. So there you go. And so I want to work with the weather forecast, so I can change directory. This is kind of weird, but that's how it works, to the weather forecast. And I can see I got a get and a post. Well, that's cool. So what happens if I type in get? I get the results, and it shows up right here, including some, the header information here that comes back, and my result in a very weird colors, but there they are. And you can change the colors. So if you run preferences and get, you can get the preferences. So here are all the colors for the JSON. So green, the braces are bold cyan, commas are yellow. You can see all that stuff there. Now, if you just started this up, there's two things on mine that you don't have, and that is this editor command default and editor command default arguments. So you can set up an editor. What do you need an editor for? Well, if you want to do a post command, you need to be able to type in what you want to post back to the API. So if you want, you can set up this editor command. It's to set that up. It's for preferences, and it took me about 4 times before I stopped typing perf and started typing pref, and set, and then you can type in editor command default. It's not very user friendly, but there you go, and then a space and the route to your editor of choice. I have selected Visual Studio Code. You can use Notepad. You can use Notepad++. You can use whatever you want. And then the next line that I have here are the arguments that I send into Visual Studio Code. So the -n says give me a new window, and the -w is for wait. So you probably want to have a wait, because if you don't have a wait, the post command will not wait for the results of your editing, and it will just continue on, and that you won't be able to post anything into it. Everybody has their editor in different places. That's why I didn't want to go into too much detail here. But if you do know where your editor is, type in the path for that. Again, you can make it anything you want as far as the editor goes. It doesn't matter. And again, I've got a post sitting out here. So what happens if I type in post? Well, it starts up Visual Studio Code, and it gives me a little template so I can enter in my post command, which is nice because now I don't have to go out and find out what was the shape of that JSON that I have to pass in. I'm going to do something silly again. Same thing I did before. Yes?
What if you don't have Visual Studio Code installed?
Well, you can use any editor you want, but you do have to set it.
Okay.
Okay. So you can use Notepad if you want to use Notepad. It's not going to hurt anything. You just have to be able to make the editor, it has to sort of pause so that you can type in the commands or fill in your shape. I'm going to save this, and then I'm just going to close the editor. And it went ahead and it finished my post command. So it posted what I wanted. And you can see here, this is the stuff I just typed in. That conversion's a little off though. And there you go. So there we have it. Now this has a lot of commands to it. I can turn echo on so I can have my request headers come through as well. So there's I turned the echo on. So here's the request echoing is on. So here's my get, here's my request. There's the request, and the user agent is HTTP REPL, and then the response. There is a lot of documentation on this. This is just a quick, hey, here's a neat little tool. You can play with it. There is scripting capabilities to it. You can, move around if you want, just like you would in a using a file system. So there you go. Any questions on that?
And that, of course, would work inside the terminal and inside of VS Code.
Yes, yes, it would.
Which probably makes it very useful because some people
it does
really like to work that way.
But there's even a better way to go. So now we've got REPL sitting out here. It would be nice if when I start up, I'm going to exit this out. It'd be nice if when I started my application, that it would just open up and give me a command line in the HTTP REPL. So how you do that is you come up here where it says Web Application 1 or whatever yours is called. You drop this down, and down here there's a browse with. And you click on that, and it opens up, this little window here. So we're in settings. And I tried to find the settings all by itself without having to go through it this way, but apparently this is the only way to get there unless somebody knows a different way to do it. I don't. So then you click on add, you type in the program. Now, where does it put this? It puts it in your users .NET tools HTTP REPL, and that's where it puts it. So if I back this up to just tools, you can see. Let me do that. No, well, I'm in the wrong spot. That's why. So tools, inside tools is the .NET REPL, HTTP REPL rather, right there. That's the application. That's the executable. So you type that in, and in it goes, and then it shows up here. And oddly enough, after you do this, the only thing you can do is cancel, even though it did what you wanted. Now, I can go up here, I go to Microsoft Edge, for example, and I can select HTTP REPL now. So now when I run, It's going to do a web browser, not really. It's going to do the HTTP REPL. So if I click on this to run it, it opens up that, then it opens up the REPL tool, and there I am, and I can do what I want. And it all works. There is a way to do this in Visual Studio Code. It's a lot more complicated, and there is some documentation. Let's see. Here, I'll put it in the chat, and this time I'll try and actually hit the Enter key when I do it. So, not there yet. There. Everybody see it? Inside that is how you can set up for Visual Studio Code. And then there is other documentation for just the REPL with all the different things you can do with it. It's in a different location. I think there's a link inside that one to get you there. Yes.
Bill, would you be so kind and put all this information into
the wiki?
Not the wiki, maybe the wiki, but I meant into the meetup. I know how to get to the meetup. I'm not sure how to get to the wiki because I cannot see the chat.
Okay. Well, if you go back, I did just stick it in a wiki, and yes, we can put it other places too. So okay. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Chris. If you put that in the wiki, Chris, that would be great. All right. So that's that. Interesting little tool. They're very proud of it at Microsoft. But there you go. So you can play with your testing through command lines. And again, there is scripting. It can play with the headers. There's authentication stuff you can put in there. There's all sorts of different things you can do. So, but way beyond what we're showing right now. So there you go. You're up, Bill.
All right. We probably have time for one more quick demo because we're like 10 minutes to go here, but hold on. There it goes. All right, so we got to do something. What Rob did a nice presentation on the new web API integration. I'm going to finish up showing you about Blazor and something new they added to Blazor. I'm a big fan of Blazor. I actually use it a lot at my clients, and I am going to make a new project. So I want you to start in Visual Studio 2019, a new fresh instance, and create a new project. And when we create that project, we want to have a ASP web application.
Oh, we can't see your screen, though.
I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay. I'm not sure why. For those that can see, I'll just keep going because, as I said, we only have a couple minutes left.
I don't know, Bill. It looks good.
All right. So we're going to do a ASP.NET Core web application. Or we could do a Blazor app. I think I want to do a Blazor app. And I'm going to click Next. And we can call it whatever we want. I'm just going to call it Blazor App Lab 4 because I have several other samples here. So I click Create. And you can do either a server or a WebAssembly. I'm just going to do a server app. I don't want to explain all the differences. We don't have time for that today. But I do want to make sure that I'm using .NET 5.0. So I have Blazor Server App, .NET 5.0, and we'll click Create and see what it makes. So Blazor is a way to run ASP.NET in the browser. Basically, you're running the .NET framework in the browser, and you can write your entire website using C#. You don't have to use any JavaScript at all. So it makes this long list of items here in the Solution Explorer. Basically, we have pages. There's one called Index. That's the home page. So if I click on that, you'll see that it just uses standard Razor syntax. As an at page, it has a route up there. Then I have a fetch data component. This one actually grabs a little forecast data and displays a fake weather forecast. Then I have a counter that actually sits there and increments a counter. And for you to see how all this runs, just do a Control F5, and it should bring up a browser window and show you Blazor running in your browser window. This is actually using WebAssembly behind the scenes. If you choose the client-side version, if you use the server-side version, technically you're using SignalR. So basically, Blazor then makes a page. It has hello world, it has a counter that works, and it has a way to call services and display tabular data. So that's pretty simple. Now, one of the real beauties of Blazor, it is architected much more like React and Angular, in the sense that the whole thing is component driven. So this counter thing here technically is a component that can live on its own. And to prove that, what we're going to do is go to the index page, and we're going to add an instance of counter. And the IntelliSense knows that counter exists. So that means anywhere on a page, I can throw an instance of counter, which could be a page by itself, or it could be just a rectangle inside another page. To prove that works, I'm going to run this, and you'll see the counter now works. And that is a separate instance from this counter, which has its own value. Okay, so pretty exciting stuff. That's how Blazor works. Now I want to show you a new feature they just added in .NET 5 that it's highly requested. And what we're going to do is we're going to make it so counter has its own CSS file. To do that, I want you to go to Pages, right-click it, say Add, New Item. And then I'm going to go into ASP.NET Core, scroll down a bit, and I'm going to look for a CSS file. Now the naming is significant. The name must be the same as the component with the extension .css. So it has to be counter razor CSS. And when I do this, watch what happens in the Solution Explorer. Aha! The counter now has its own CSS file underneath it, which is very self-explanatory. Now notice the counter has a heading. It has an H1. In fact, several of the pages have H1s. The weather forecast, the index. What if we change the H1 for just this component to have a font family, and you knew I was going to do this, of Comic Sans, and let's do a color of green. Okay, so that theoretically is only going to impact counter and not any other page in your entire application. The reason this is so important, when you make a really big applications, you end up with dozens or even hundreds of components. And it's really, really hard to remember what CSS applies to each individual component. By making the separate files and having that live as a team with the component itself, you've isolated this, and the net result is you get a header in Comic Sans in green. This is an H1, but this is an H1. Even though they're on the same page, this one is isolated. If we go here, it uses Comic Sans. If we go there, it uses the standard font. So, pretty useful. Any questions on the wonderful world of Blazor?
So how did you group to a counter raiser under counter raiser, that CSS file? So you can add anywhere in the solution this file?
Well, I added it. I technically right-clicked pages, and I made sure I added it in the right folder.
Okay. Okay.
So you would have to make sure you're in the correct folder.
Okay.
But I think it's a nice implementation. Again, you need the newest version of Visual Studio to do this. You need the newest version of .NET Core, and which of course affects the newest version of Blazor.
So the benefit I see here, you don't have to go and reference the CSS file on the, and you, as long as it's there in the same group, it's going to implement.
Well, technically there is a CSS file for the entire site. It's right there. But we don't have to put, in the old days, what you would have had to do is you would have had to say like H1 had a class name of, counter title or something like that. Yeah. And then you had to go back into your site.css and said, make this work for counter title. It's just a nice thing. Yeah. If you have experience with React or Angular, this is a very common technique to use. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Bill.
Yep. So so that works. Rob, did you have another one to show? Because we're like sort of out of time.
I did, but that's okay. We don't have to show it.
No, there will be other meetings.
There will be other meetings.
Let's go back and see how many people actually stuck around.
Well, there's two. That's the presenters and then the attendees.
Yeah, I did that.
Okay.
I figured out how to make it so that you didn't have to let people in the lobby.
I do have a question for the people who are out there. The ones who could not see the chat, were you using the desktop version or the web version?
Web version, and it disappeared. Like it was fine most of the night.
Desktop version.
Desktop version.
Desktop version.
There is a note online that says there's some problems with the chat disappearing over a certain number of people.
Ah, so that's like a little. Well, that's why Salesforce is buying Slack. Not Teams. Got it. Okay. Hopefully,
right. Well, Microsoft does have a thing for broadcasting to larger meetings, but the problem is you lose all the ability for like people to like ask questions and that.
Yes, the live.
Excellent.
Live session.
Excellent segue. So the way I'm using Teams, using what's called a channel meeting, allows us to all collaborate at the same time. Technically, any of you could take over screen control if we allowed it, but you can also ask questions, and you don't get to do that if you use what's called an event in Teams. So this worked reasonably well. For those of you that were checking, we were actually up to 90 people at one time. Worked fine.
I saw 91.
When I end the meeting, it will save the recording, and if everything works according to plan, if you come back in here later on and you go to Philly.net and then you go down to this particular channel, which is labeled with the year and the month. That's the lab for 2020 December.
Bill,
You'll see in here some notes that people have added, and it'll have the recording sitting here probably sometime later tonight.
And Bill, can you go up and open up the wiki? So show everybody where it is.
There's a wiki, and the wiki has some additional documentation where Rob added links, and I guess Chris was helping too.
Yes.
And how do you join the team?
Bill, yeah. Would you be so kind also put in the
Okay.
meetup? How
Okay.
do we get to here?
Okay. So when we sent out the message on Meetup, okay, so this is our website. Now, Teams doesn't give us a website. We're still using Meetup for that. Technically, you don't have to register, but it's nice if you do. And the reason you want to register is sometimes Rob and I will send you an email just to the people that are registered in the meeting with instructions. Okay? Also notice that if you go to this particular event, it has a link up here. Okay, see the link here? That will open up Teams in the correct place. Now, using this approach, it opens up the web version of Teams using a browser. If you already have the full Teams client installed, then you open up the Teams client and you log in with the account that you registered with in the last 2 days. So once you learn how to do that, you will be able to go in and access all the information, including the presentation that we did a couple months ago. And there's a video here where we actually spent an hour and a half showing you how to use Teams. So basically, you have to learn how to use Teams, and Microsoft has plenty of videos and things explaining how you do that. But given the fact that we got 90 people logged in successfully tonight, we're on our way. We're going to be successful at this. I will close by letting you know that Chris Gomez, another MVP that helps us run this group, he is going to do the next session. And Chris is an expert at GitHub, and he's going to show you in much more detail some of what Rob introduced tonight, and also show you GitHub Actions and some other interesting things. So that is 2 weeks from tonight. So put that in your schedule. If you registered as a guest with your email address tonight, you will automatically get emails to that address reminding you of these things from Teams.
Hey, Bill, if you could include GitHub Azure in there, it would be great.
Okay, if Chris is still on, I'll get that information to him. He may still be listening.
Thank you.
Okay. The other thing I do want to bring up is I'm trying to get all this stuff organized so that in January we can actually run a code camp using Teams. When we do that, there will be a half a dozen meetings running concurrently, and you'll be able to swap between them and jump around and then go watch all the recordings. And we're busy recruiting speakers for these. The address to be a speaker is listed in the description. So if anyone's interested, you can see we already have 180 people signed up for that, and they have no idea what's going to be presented. They just want to come. So we're going to try and get all the speakers that used to come to Code Camp back in the years and get them to present. And if you want to present, by all means, sign up. So with that, I end the meeting.
Thank you.
And hopefully you had a good time and you learned some stuff, and we'll see you again in a couple weeks.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. See y'all later.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Nice job.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, guys.